Hi there. We meet again for episode 4 of American Road Trip, and it's Kath Reade's Travel Tales. So episode 4 of American Road Trip is actually the penultimate, and tomorrow, of course, by definition then, will be the last episode. So sit back and relax, and I actually have a cup of tea in true English fashion here, so I'll just have a sip. And I hope you too have a drink with you, and do relax. And if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. Today we made for Monterey, a more upmarket Californian coast town, prone to blue sea mists that swirl around the hills, that again look like a painted backdrop vista in a Western film. The wind was sharp this morning, and I bought a black hooded top with Monterey, California embossed on it. But it was made in China, like most other things. We did a long stride along a walking and biking trail beside the sea to get to the aquarium, where we thrillingly found ourselves inches from 3 sea otters. Through the glass, obviously. They were floating like 3 furry buoyancy aids on their backs, looking like inverted begging dogs. These mammals are quite hard to spot in the wild, so this was a pretty special sight. Their smaller cousins, the Asian freshwater otters, were extremely lively and entertaining in an adjoining enclosure. There were bright green vine snakes, as thin as the vines they hung from, impossibly still, poised over the water. One suddenly struck to take a fish that looked too big to swallow, but they can unhinge their jaws, so no problem. You may notice I brought out this little snake, carved in India for this occasion. The tuna fish, after only seeing them in tins, are stunningly large and were swimming in a huge circular tank with hammerhead sharks, turtles and graceful rays. There was a huge comedy fish that looked like it was made of rubber and modelled on a cross between Charles Lawton and the English comedian Les Dawson. Only its mother could love it, remarked my companion Kath. We had a great seafood lunch in the Fish Hopper restaurant, feet from the sea, and we watched scuba divers and kayakers going through the kelp forests, waving in the swell. Later on, one of the divers told us they'd been swimming with a tiger shark through the kelp, rather them than me. Many people were eating the local speciality, a large round crusty loaf of bread with the top cut off and filled with seafood chowder. As usual, the size was big. Along the seafront was a statue of an Italian woman looking out to sea, with a dedication to the Sicilian fishermen who had developed a thriving sardine canning industry here decades ago, hence the name Cannery Wharf. There are still many Italian restaurants and coffee shops here as a result, and we had a gorgeous skinny latte before turning in at the Sand Dollar Inn for the night. The receptionist gave us a room, which involved dragging our heavy suitcases up and down several flights of concrete steps just to travel forward a few yards. At last, relaxing between the clean linen sheets, I settled down and gently dreamed of undulating, psychedelic jellyfish, for we had seen an art gallery in the aquarium entirely devoted to their myriad colours, patterns and shapes. There was a quote underneath the display, which I very much liked. It said, "If I was a painter, I would get all my patterns from nature." This behind me, if you can see it, it's a mandala that was painted by my friend Michelle Simcox. And you can see nature's patterns in that too. And how art and science and nature are all very closely entwined in sacred geometry. In the morning, after trying to resist the hotel's breakfast complimentary cakes and pastries, we travelled on to get to San Luis Obispo, to the famous Pink Madonna Inn. On the way, we stopped at the millionaire resort of Carmel in Western California, home of Clint Eastwood. But no one will tell you where he lives, not even the uniformed litter picker by the beach. I asked him, "Hey, can you tell me where Clint Eastwood lives?" "Oh, just over there a ways," he said vaguely. It was as if they were all in a kind of understanding to protect Clint. The shoreline here was battered by heavy-duty waves that hit the long sand with a sound like claps of thunder. I think the sand was so flat, it just thwacked down on it. The rhythm of this was hypnotic as we walked the length of the beach, where many affluent Californians walk their big, expensive-looking dogs. The sea mist gradually got burnt off by the sun as we walked back past the incredibly rich-looking houses which overlook the sea and are lined with flowers and trees and gardeners and maids. A gaggle of nannies pushing their moneyed babies in top-of-the-range strollers passed us by, and I heard one of them say, "That would just leave me devastated, just devastated," in true Californian drama queen style, probably talking about breaking one of her nails, but then that's me being mischievous. We flicked through a real estate newspaper in a coffee bar and saw that houses here in Carmel cost between $1 million and $12 million. Quite reasonable if you win the lottery. All in Carmel was quiet, clean, orderly and neat. No handbrake turns here. Only expensive boutiques with no visible price tags. We saw a fetching blouse, but dropped it like a hot coal upon learning it was $225. We resumed our drive along Highway 1 as it turned into the Big Sur, a famous oceanside highway drive. Some say one of the best drives in the world, along hairpin bends, on top of cliffs, dropping down alongside beaches packed with basking seals. Gleaming Harley-Davidson motorbikes were touring in packs along here. And you know, it actually reminded me so much of coastal paths that I've seen here in England and Scotland and Wales. So again, we see the same patterns cropping up in geography. Large birds of prey were 10 a penny, wheeling with outstretched, exquisitely patterned wings. Flocks of pelicans patrolled the waves, often flying in formation. We paused at Morro Bay, a surfing and fishing town, and I had some delicious snow crab fish cakes with salad, washed down with the inevitable Diet Coke with ice. I have had gallons of the stuff while trying to keep the weight off, and the caffeine intake down. But now I'm probably full of chemicals instead. C'est la vie. Kath had buffalo popcorn shrimp, from which she carefully removed the batter for the same reason. The restaurant overlooked the harbour with its giant dome of rock rising out of the sea. This defines the landscape and the content of most postcards here. Our greatest achievement in Morro Bay was to wander into a shop that turned out to be selling freshly baked, sticky cinnamon rolls, and not to buy any, despite the tantalising smell coming from these sweet brown cakes encrusted with walnuts. It was hell. In a surfing shop, we interrogated 2 athletic young men who worked there about the size of their surfboards. We learned that the bigger or longer the board, the more easy to ride initially. However, the shorter, more pointed boards are more speedy and manoeuvrable. It was the difference between driving a large, comfortable saloon car and a little sporty roadster. When we said we were too old to surf, they vehemently disagreed, which was kind of cute. We reached our hotel for the night, but this hotel is an inadequate description for the place, because this was the famous Madonna Inn, a vision in pink. It's like a Barbie hotel. Everything is fluffy, glitzy, and totally OTT. It means to be, that's what it's aiming at. Each room has a different theme. The jungle room, for example, has a shower like a rock waterfall. We were in the Cuyuna Queen room, like a hotel room in a cowboy film. It was the sort of room that Gary Cooper and Miss Kitty from the downstairs saloon would be holed up in. She would be pleading with him not to go to the inevitable gunfight at noon. "Don't do it, please." And he would reply gruffly, "A man's got to do what a man's got to do." We splashed out that night and dined in style in their opulent restaurant. It was like dining in a candy floss labyrinth. A pink leather upholstered half-moon sofa with table. Golden cherubs turning slowly from the ceiling. Pink raffia gardenias hanging everywhere. And hundreds of tiny pink lights glittering all over the show. We had the most exquisite fillet steak that you could part with a fork. A giant salad with pickles, vegetables, cheese, olives, salami, fresh baked bread. We declined the baked potatoes and rice that also came. 3/4 of the way through, Kath declared, "I feel like I'm in the rib eating contest." This was a reference to same that we had incredulously watched in Monterey, where 8 men were egged on by the crowd to cram as many barbecued ribs as possible into their sauce-stained mouths. 3 of them managed 10 ribs each. It had been horribly fascinating. We sat back in the Madonna, stuffed with food, still surrounded by a feast on the table. And then the waiter brought us a tray of the most flamboyant, beautiful and enormous gâteau of every creed and flavour. No, we cried, no, no thanks all the same. As Kath had remarked, we could only have tackled those as well if we had a paramedic in attendance. It should be explained here that myself and Kath both absolutely love food. But it so happened that this holiday came in the middle of a fairly major weight loss drive, and we were trying desperately not to blow it and return to England like a couple of trainee whales. Actually, everywhere we went, the food was great and the service just absolutely excellent. In England, there are some places that find your presence quite annoying and you feel like you're interrupting them. But this is improving now in Britain, I think, a lot. So in the Madonna Hotel, just recovering from our wonderful meal, we suddenly heard American big band music from the 1930s and 40s era striking up nearby. How lucky we were, for it transpired that every Monday evening at the Madonna was swing dance night. This is a cross between the Charleston, the jitterbug and the jive. Couples on the dance floor were giving a wonderful display of their skills. They really knew their stuff, and many were dressed in clothes from that era. A young swarthy man with an unfeasibly enormous black quiff fascinated us with his seemingly effortless glide across the floor, a bit like Michael Jackson's moonwalk, but going forwards. An old couple who were perfectly coordinated knew all the East Coast, West Coast routines. A young girl was perfectly turned out in a beautiful pencil skirt, of the 1940s, and a hairstyle which was from that era and just immaculate. And she was dancing with a boy who was dressed in an army uniform from the sort of the Glenn Miller era. They were really into it and doing it well. We jitterbugged back to our cowboy room across the car park in the moonlight and knew no more until morning. And that's the end of episode 4. So I'm glad you're here listening with me. And tomorrow is the last episode, so do join me again and see how it all ended. And it's at 4 o'clock tomorrow, UK time. So take care of yourselves. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.